Miraculous Tales of Ladybug and Cat Noir is a long-running TV series that focuses primarily on two teenagers named Marinette Dupain Chang and Adrian Agreste, who become the title heroes Ladybug and Cat Noir. It's a show that, on the surface, doesn't have a lot of mythology, but the deeper you dig into the show and the way it's produced, the more spiritual I believe it becomes. In the show, the majority of superheroes and villains get their powers from magical items called miraculous, that contain powerful, almost godlike entities known as kwami. These kwami are cute creatures meant to embody entire concepts that are so powerful that to use their power alone tends to cause great mayhem. To safely utilize a kwami, it needs a human wearer, who is transformed into a superhero by the kwami and granted its magic abilities. This allows Ladybug and Cat Noir to fight bad guys and save the day, particularly the villain Shadow Moth, who is actually Adrian Agreste's father, Gabriel Agreste, who also happens to have the Miraculous of the Moth and the Miraculous of the Peacock. In the show, it's confirmed that certain figures like Joan of Arc were a previous holder of the Ladybug Miraculous, and supposedly online, it's been confirmed by the creators that Jesus himself was also a miraculous holder. Whether or not this is true, the show has made it clear that kwami have affected history, and it makes sense that magical-seeming mythological figures from the past might have had a kwami giving them their power. The spiritual influence of the show, however, doesn't come from a historical or mythological tale, but rather from the concept of Yin and Yang itself. In ancient Chinese philosophy, Yin and Yang represented darkness and light, destruction and creation. These were represented by a perfect circle within which there are equal sides of dark and light, or Yin and Yang. These two ideas are meant to be thought of as spinning in a constant loop. The symbol itself remaining the same, but our perspective on which side is dark and which side is light constantly shifting. You could see this as representing the night and day, with our perspective of which time is night simply depending on which part of the globe we are in. With that in mind, creation and destruction aren't seen as entirely separate entities, but rather opposite ends of the same extreme. One idea that looks creative or destructive depending on our perspective. In the show, destruction and creation are embodied by the miraculous of the black cat and the ladybug respectively. According to Master Suhan, the kwami are meant to exist in yin-yang pairings where each kwami's power is balanced with another's who is complementary. The most obvious of these are Tiki and Plague as the kwami of creation and destruction, but this applies to the others as well. In Master Fu's Miracle Box, we see that each miraculous has its own special compartment where it's meant to be held, with the very center of this containing a yin-yang symbol with the miraculous of destruction and the miraculous of creation. While it may at first look like the miraculous of destruction, a black ring, is placed on the white side, which is creation, it is actually placed on a small black dot representing the yin within yang. The miraculous of the ladybug, meanwhile, is placed on a small white dot representing the yang within yin. Tiki and Plague don't just have the powers of creation and destruction either, but their personalities embody this as well. Plague is chaotic and unthinking, leading to destruction whether he means it or not. Even when he's first introduced, he immediately goes on a rampage in Adrian's room, not really caring about anything and just trying to see what he can eat. His power is the Cataclysm, which when unchecked is so strong that it wiped out the dinosaurs, and when wielded by Adrian can be used to destroy just about anything. Plague's personality is so destructive itself that he reveals he only destroyed the dinosaurs out of a petty argument over whether or not they were really tough, with Plague wanting to prove them wrong. Tiki, meanwhile, is the kwami of creation, with the power to create lucky charms that help him create a solution to defeat bad guys, as well as her magical ladybugs that use the power of creation to fix anything that the villains or other miraculous have destroyed. Tiki tends to be a lot more calm and thoughtful. She tends to think ahead because that is how you create the outcome you want, whereas going in without thinking is how you just destroy things. We see this best in the episode Kwami Busters, where Plague can't resist sneaking around the school to find food to eat, with Tiki there to nag him about how horrible an idea it is because they can and eventually do get caught. The holders of the miraculous embody these ideas as well, with Adrian being more chaotic and wanting to rush in and punch the bad guys with his cataclysm power. Marinette, meanwhile, likes to bide her time. She likes to test her opponent to learn about them. Then, after a little analyzation, she conjures up a lucky charm that can be used to defeat the villain, and then uses her magical ladybugs to fix everything. We even see this alignment in their basic character designs. Marinette has a white shirt with the black overgarment, representing the white yang within the black yin. Adrian, meanwhile, wears a black shirt with a white overgarment, representing the black yin within the white yang. But yin and yang are not seen as just complementary opposites, as we said, but rather opposite ends of the same extreme, going through a constant loop, a swirl that eventually makes them one. The idea of this constant loop is something very important to the show, so much so that it's something we get a very clear idea from the show's opening and ending credits. The opening credits is just a fun song that introduces us to the world, but at the end of the show, we return to the same song, but with an instrumental rendition, already making you feel like you've returned to where you started with this song repeating from the beginning of the episode. With it, we also get the animation loop of the constant cycle of Marinette and Adrien turning to Ladybug and Cat Noir, then back, over and over again. It captures the idea that the show is this constant loop. These little loops that continue to make a big loop the same way that days go on to make a week and then months and then a year. With each episode of Miraculous Ladybug being its own little loop that has its own formula that builds into the bigger seasonal formula and the bigger 5-season formula. It's across these 5 seasons that the first year of the show takes place, with it taking exactly 1 year for Ladybug and Cat Noir to defeat their first villain, Shadowmoth. With that in mind, we don't just have the episodic formula or the seasonal formula, but this entire formula of defeating one villain, with his formula as a villain meant to feel like one larger loop like we'd imagine the year being. On all these different levels then, you can imagine the Yin and Yang symbol circling to make a full loop for each of its characters, episodes, formulas, themes, seasons, and this entire 5-season arc. With that repeating again in the next 5 seasons where we get a brand new villain, and the story likely taking place over just another year. To mark the end of the loop, Season 5 ends with the unification of Tiki and Plag, Yin and Yang finally fusing together. This is first done with Marinette, who transforms to Ladybug and Cat Noir simultaneously, becoming Catbug for the first time in the show. This fusion of powers represents Marinette's mastery over both creation and destruction, after a complete loop to the moment where she's not just ready to defeat Gabriel, but also to forgive him and give him the opportunity to do the right thing. He does this even as he betrays her, by fusing Tiki and Plag together to make a wish, but not the evil wish that he had originally set out to do. The goal of Shadowmoth, or Gabriel Agreste, was to bring back his dead wife and the mother of his son, Adrien. Ladybug and Cat Noir can't let this happen, however, because to do so would cause someone else to lose their life. This is because Yin and Yang, destruction and creation, live in a perfect balance. The two are meant to be one and the same, as you can't create something seemingly new without destroying what it was before. All is one and one is all, so for one life to return, another must go. When Tiki and Plag first fuse, they become Gimme, the Kwami of reality, embodying all that was, is, and will be. Gimme's name is a mystery, but some speculate that it's meant to sound like gimme or give me, because when people call on Gimme, it's only to get their wish granted. Gimme emphasizes this when they say that no one ever calls upon them to rejoice, only to complain, to make wishes that change reality despite it all just rearranging reality more than anything. Gabriel's ability to finally unify creation and destruction represents him unifying his own extremes after his full turn on the cosmic wheel, bringing him back to what they had used these powers for to begin with, for the sake of creating a happy family through the birth of Adrien. With this in mind, he sacrifices his own life not to bring back his wife Emily, but to heal Natalie so that she could continue to take care of Adrien, the one person that Emily wanted to see go on and have a happy life, despite the dark magics that Gabriel and Emily had gotten themselves wrapped up in. It's a 5-season journey that took our characters to some really interesting places, taking Gabriel and turning him from a villain into someone who just wants to be redeemed, taking Marinette and turning her into a great hero, and taking Paris and reforming it into a modern paradise after Shadowmoth, Gabriel, and the Bourgeois family are finally kicked out of power. Despite all this, and even getting a relationship with Adrien, however, the story isn't done with Ladybug. The key to the show so far was that Gabriel Agreste was using the stolen Miraculous of the Moth to turn the citizens of Paris to villains that go after Ladybug and Cat Noir's Miraculous. Although Ladybug does defeat Shadowmoth, she has a very near miss in getting the Moth Miraculous back when she accidentally knocks it into the sewers, where it would later be found by the next villain, Lila Rossi. This is a very unlucky moment, despite Ladybug claiming to Gabriel in that very episode that the reason she was able to finally track him down and defeat him is that luck is one of her powers. But that doesn't actually seem to be the case. Luck is an interesting element in the world of Miraculous Ladybug that started with her Lucky Charms, a fun nod to the real-life Lucky Charms that young girls are known to collect that can be put on bracelets and the like. In the show, Ladybug creates a Lucky Charm after observing a villain, with the Lucky Charm giving her one piece to a convoluted puzzle that will help her defeat the villain. This implies luck is on her side as she claimed to Gabriel, but if that was the case, why would the moth be kept away from her? Why wouldn't luck blow the Miraculous of the Moth just a little closer to Marinette, instead of into the hands of the worst possible person? My theory is that whether you want to call it gimme, luck, or even the power of God, something is actually guiding Ladybug and only using luck to her advantage when it's going to help her grow, not just win. The point of the show is that all of these characters are being tested by this constant cyclical formula, one that repeats over and over again until it gets the desired result and they can finally break out of the loop that they're trapped in. If luck was just on Marinette's side, it probably would have given her what she wanted instead of what she needed. We see evidence for this in the episodes Cat Blanc and Ephemeral, two different episodes where Marinette and Adrien end up learning each other's secret identities and end up in a happy relationship, only for the relationship itself to be what causes everything to fall apart. In both episodes, however, this just leads to Gabriel finding out the secret identity of his son and later Marinette, leading to time travel having to be used in order to stop this. From these episodes, we can see that luck, God, or gimme has a bigger plan for Marinette, Gabriel, and everyone else. It wants them to have generally happy endings, but in order to get there, it has to put them through the proper trials, not so that they can earn it, but so that they can have what they want while being safe and healthy and contributing to this God's bigger plans. The goal isn't to just give Marinette what she wants and help her win, but to turn her into an even greater entity. The idea of this can be found in religions like Hinduism, where the creator and the destroyer figures are in perfect balance with each other, but also with a third figure known as the preserver. In Hinduism, the creator is Brahma and the destroyer is known as Shiva. Despite being a destroyer, Shiva is not an evil entity, but just a natural part of the cycles of death and rebirth that everything goes through, including the world itself. In this system, creation and destruction are almost mindless, and the intelligent force is portrayed as Vishnu, or Krishna, the preserver. The preserver's job is to manipulate events so that they get their desired outcome of who is destroyed and who is preserved to make it to the next cycle of destruction. Vishnu has taken forms to protect humans from great catastrophes of destruction in the past, allowing them to be preserved and continue their cycles of growth over many lifetimes. Despite how much luck it gives to Ladybug, it didn't just make the Miraculous of the Moth get away, it was what gave the Miraculous of the Moth to Gabriel in the first place, something rather unlucky. Gabriel, Marinette, and Adrien all received the Miraculous in ways that were random, yet the three of them were, or would become, very connected regardless of the Miraculous. As if someone even above Master Fu had chosen Ladybug, Adrien, and Gabriel to receive these. Gabriel was only able to get the Miraculous of the Moth himself, thanks to the previous Miraculous Guardian Master Fu making the terrible mistake of letting the Moth and Peacock get away, leading to his entire order and their temple being destroyed. It seems to me that Luck purposely used Master Fu to guide the Miraculous box away from this order, who was likely meant to hold it with their strict rules for a time, but only so that it could one day get to Master Fu and then to Marinette, who Luck has a much bigger plan for. Marinette would start with just the Miraculous of the Ladybug, slowly being trained to use all these different powers before becoming the guardian of the Miraculous box herself. But Marinette's training is not done, and the best way to continue that training is to take the thing that has trained her thus far, the Miraculous of the Moth, and give it to someone even more crazy than Gabriel, Lila Rossi. We know the show is meant to run for another 10 years, which would perfectly repeat the loop of the battle against Gabriel for the first 5 seasons of the show. But just as the episodic formula and the seasonal formula gets crazier each year, that just means that this 5-season-long villain formula is just going to get more crazy the second time around. And we can see hints to how that will go by examining the formula of the previous arc. Miraculous Ladybug has such a strong focus on its formula that it affects both its production and its story. The formula is simple. Every day, Gabriel uses the power of the Moth Miraculous to prey on someone in a weak emotional state and then akumatize them, turning them into a villain with a unique power. Ladybug and Cat Noir have to transform, observe the villain, then use the lucky charm to find an exact way to defeat them. This ends with Ladybug de-evilizing the butterfly, representing the sad emotional state she saved the character from, and then she fixes the damage done to the city with her magical ladybugs. This formula is best played with, I think, in the episode Simple Man, where Marinette's grandfather is given the power to make the world itself more simple because he doesn't understand the complexity of the Ladybug and Cat Noir cartoon within the show. By making everything in the formula more simple, we get to see the bare essence of why the formula exists, why Ladybug and Cat Noir can't just go looking for Shadow Moth when he can just hide, why Cat Noir can't just use his cataclysm on the bad guy, and most importantly, how it trains its viewers to think. The point of the show is that it teaches kids to think critically, not in the way that they can actually use simple items to create complex plans, but rather it teaches the viewers to think critically about creativity, how to use powers in a magical world in order to exploit them against each other, with that logic being explored as the seasons progress. The formula goes well beyond this battle, with there being small moments you can expect to see in every single episode. For instance, the final moment after the battle where Ladybug and Cat Noir bump fists while saying "pound it" to celebrate their victory. While it's a seemingly unimportant part of the formula, it's a very easy way to show how this formula can be played with. In the episode Timebreaker, due to time travel shenanigans, Ladybug ends up saving the day with another version of herself, and they end up doing the pound it together. In the episode Oblivia, we see Ladybug and Cat Noir pound it, but because their memories of the battle were erased, they weren't even sure if they had defeated the villain.
Guys, you haven't seen a supervillain named Oblivio, have you?
You've defeated it already, dude.
Oh, okay.
Pound it?
In another episode, we see what would happen if Cat Noir activated his Cataclysm, but then just didn't need to use it as part of the normal formula.
Pound?
Oops, sorry.
Pound it!
It's an example of how one change of the formula can ripple out and affect other aspects, which becomes an important part of making the show interesting by showing how to exploit their own formula for an interesting outcome. A large inspiration for this seems to be the 90s anime series Sailor Moon, where it derives a lot of its structure from, with Sailor Moon actually being made by one of the co-producers of Miraculous Ladybug, Toei Animation. Sailor Moon had a strong focus on formula as well, with each episode having a different person being targeted by the villain, who is either attacked by a monster or turned into a monster themselves like a Miraculous Ladybug. The episode ends with Sailor Moon's transformation and using her powers to heal or elsewise save the person by defeating the bad guy. Because of how expensive 2D animation is, most of Sailor Moon was animated with very little motion, being made up of stills and very simple animation in order to save money. To make the episodes feel like they had more motion and, more importantly, action, each episode includes stock footage of much more detailed animation involving Serena's transformation into Sailor Moon, as well as her various attacks. With the stock footage mixed and matched with that of the other characters, each episode is able to give a sense of action and motion to a formulaic story. And the Miraculous Ladybug crew borrowed a lot from these principles. Miraculous Ladybug includes transformations and attacks that are used in every single episode, as well as musical cues that are recycled as well. The stock footage doesn't take up the bulk of the battles the way it could in Sailor Moon, especially in its later seasons, but all the different parts of the formula allow them to fill up a lot of the time. With Miraculous Ladybug being 3D, they also have a lot of stock footage that can be placed over new backgrounds in each episode, saving a lot of time and money not having to reanimate it, and also not distracting from the actual location like the transformations and attacks do with their magical backgrounds. However, while Sailor Moon leaned into its formula and its use of stock footage to an arguable fault, Miraculous Ladybug uses it as an excuse to keep things fresh, shifting just one aspect of their formula at a time from episode to episode or season to season, as the Yin Yang wheel makes its rotation and things slowly shift from one extreme to another over time. Early on, this formula would be played with in episodes like Season 1's Timebreaker, where a lot of the stock footage would be played twice, side by side on a split screen, due to Ladybug using her power in different timelines. We saw this sort of formula play again in the two-part Origin special, where Ladybug doesn't actually know that she's supposed to de-evilize the butterfly, and thus the villains aren't stopped and the plot has to carry over into a second episode. In the climactic episode Antibug, Ladybug would go against an evil version of herself when Chloe gets akumatized and is given powers meant to rip off ladybugs. This is a fun switch up to the formula and one that teaches us just how important this formula is. Being the anti-Ladybug, Antibug uses an anti-charm, which basically turns into whatever Chloe wants, which is of course just a massive weapon to defeat Ladybug with. Ladybug meanwhile has her regular lucky charm, which she can't control and can turn into just about anything, but which, even when it gives her a very ridiculous item, still manages to be exactly what she needs to defeat Antibug. We'd eventually start to see characters like Gabriel exploit the logic in order to do things like akumatize himself. There's also an episode where our main character switch Kwame, and with the show being about how these formulas can be repeated in new ways, we even see them switch Kwame again for different commentary in a later episode. The whole point of the show is that the formula repeats itself, and when you change the formula, even just once a season, that formula itself can repeat from season to season as well. On the larger scale, we see this formula shift not just episode to episode, but season to season as a whole, with each season and even half season having very distinct changes to that formula. Season 2 would begin to introduce more heroes, but Season 3 would max out that roster before eventually giving the Miracle Box to Marinette to guard herself. Season 4 had her handing out these powers as needed to her army of heroes, but Season 5 had her not just losing those powers, but those powers going directly to Shadow Moth. Up to that point, the show had been about Marinette's growth from just Ladybug to the Guardian of the Miraculous. But suddenly, she had lost all the powers that had been there to help her win. And even though she needed them to outsmart Shadow Moth, she was now expected to find ways to outsmart those very same powers when used against her. Luck once again flipping the story to another extreme to test its characters. The point of all this is to slowly rotate the characters through every possible outcome on the Yin and Yang wheel. And I think this is proven by the Miraculous World Paris special where we see the alternate universes. Many have a Ladybug and Cat Noir, but in some cases they are held by different people than Marinette and Adrien. Here we seem to have the idea that the multiple realities are all spaced across this Yin and Yang wheel, with some being extremely light and some being extremely dark, with most just being somewhere in the middle. In this Paris special, the normal reality is presented as an extreme good outcome where people are nice more so than they are mean. But we also get introduced to the reverse reality, a place where the miraculous end up in the hands of the same people as in our world, but their moral compasses are reversed. In this world, Ladybug is Shadybug, and she works with Claw Noir for an ultimate evil known as the Supreme. In this world, Gabriel is the hero and still has the Miraculous of the Moth, which here is referred to as the Miraculous of the Butterfly because he is a hero known as Betterfly instead of the villain known as Shadow Moth. In this alternate reality, even the other students at the high school are said to be mean to that world's version of Marinette and Adrien because it is a darker reality. And that's an important part of this discussion because Marinette and Adrien aren't the only ones put through this Yin and Yang wheel. And instead, we get to see all these different characters go through their own rotations in the show as well, with repeat akumatizations. The execution of this is something that has its roots in Sailor Moon, I would say, but more so in Miraculous's attempts to improve on Sailor Moon's formula. Sailor Moon is a 2D animated show, which means that for relatively little cost, they could quickly design a new character for every single episode, with there being as many as 46 episodes in a season. All it took to design a character was to sit down and draw some basic ideas, and the other animators could work this new character into the episode. But in 3D, there are more steps. In Miraculous Ladybug, at least at the time and style it was originally made, making characters required carving out models and making unique 3D hair, as well as rigging them, so it's a lot more work. This is why, even when they tried to create new characters at some point, they just recycled less important characters and palette swapped them in order to have more extras. To save money, the show would get to a point in Season 3 where all of its characters and even some new ones had already been akumatized, and the only solution was to start akumatizing them again. Additionally, at a certain point, Ladybug and Cat Noir needed new teammates, and this led to characters already in their class being turned into superheroes when Ladybug lends them the Miraculous. While it seems like it's just a cost-saving idea that has its roots in Sailor Moon's recycled stock footage system, it actually builds on what fans love about it that got sparingly used. In the original Sailor Moon, fans didn't generally care for the one-off characters that were targeted by the villains because they would be gone the next week and because they had no powers. And it's not that every character needs powers, but the most interesting episodes of Sailor Moon were the ones where the villains targeted the Sailor Scouts themselves. This gave the Sailor Scouts not just action, but drama, an emotional battle they had to go through that led to them being targeted. Even if the episode was going to end the same way as it did with a filler character, it still gave us something to examine the characters we already loved with. These were often episodes based on chapters of the manga, which was more focused on its core characters in general, but even the ones that were entirely original to the anime are considered some of the best in the series. It led to cases where characters like Sailor Venus could have nearly identical episodes from one season to the next, but with each having a different ending to show how much she had grown. When not focusing on the Sailor Scouts, the most interesting episodes would focus on people close to Sailor Moon herself being targeted, particularly her best friend Molly. Molly was someone Serena knew from before she became Sailor Moon, like Marinette and Alia, but with a lot more history since they had just met that day. Molly was a frequent target for villains early on to give Sailor Moon someone close to her that she could save, but over time she became less important to the plot instead of more so the way that Alia and the others have in Miraculous Ladybug. Molly did have some episodes in a few of the later seasons, mostly focusing on her relationship with another season 1 character named Melvin, but by season 5 she was entirely forgotten. This was unfortunate because a lot of fans wanted Molly to become a Sailor Scout as well, and there was a hope that she would one day become Sailor Earth in the later seasons because that character was never introduced. But with that never happening, all we had was piles and piles of fan fiction where this happens because that's what the fans wanted. And with that in mind, it seemed like the Miraculous crew knew that they would set up the desire for characters to become heroes over several seasons before finally giving the audience what they wanted when Ladybug gave the characters their own Kwami. The key to these characters' stories is not just repeating them, however, but by having the characters achieve enough growth that by the next time they are akumatized, we are able to get something of a sequel to their original story, running them through more and more loops of their yin-yang cycle. Every character and idea isn't just played with once, but they all have to be mixed and matched to see what their potential outcome can be before returning to where they started with this new information. Part of this is done without even having to re-akumatize the villains by having all the characters be interconnected in their community. By the time we get to re-akumatization, we're already familiar with a character beyond their own akumatization because someone else to them has already been akumatized as well. We'll see Marinette fighting an akumatized child that she babysits in one episode, and then in the next fight her akumatized mother. And each time they do get akumatized, the character gets really upset, but by the end of the episode they also get something like therapy, an opportunity to show change, or to start change if nothing else. And sometimes there is nothing else because sometimes a character comes back to where they started knowing they want to get akumatized again one day because they have negative plans. The greatest example of this is probably Chloe and her family. Andre is a character who is somewhere in the middle with his moral alignment, and you can see him being a hero in one episode and then being an absolute villain in the very next, with his character making a full spin on the yin-yang wheel as well. It's this kind of logic that led to the fake-out redemption of Chloe, who started as a villain but closer to the middle of the series seemed to be turning into a hero. She had the opportunity to work with Ladybug when she needed Chloe on several occasions to wield the Be Miraculous, and Chloe did show that she wanted to be a hero more than she wanted to be a villain, but that isn't because she wanted to be good more than she wanted to be evil. The formula required Chloe to be tested just as the other students and characters are, but she is not a good person the way most of the other students are. And even with the negative history that Marinette can have with characters like Sabrina or Kim, can find themselves realizing that they'd much rather be a hero than a villain by the time that they complete their own loops. Chloe, on the other hand, wants to be a hero not because she wants to be good, but because it gives her everything she wants. It gives her fame, it gives her power, and it makes her the center of attention. And while she can plan enough ahead to put off being evil for a short while in order to try and get Ladybug to trust her, this wasn't a good enough reason for her to become a hero herself. And thus she eventually reverts to her original self and starts being a villain again, instead working for Lila in order to get her way. With each re-akumatization, characters get to go deeper on fixing their own issues, but over time that turns akumatization into the bigger issue itself. This makes sense as akumatization is a part of the Miraculous Ladybug formula, and the point of the formula is always to see how you can exploit that itself. After too many re-akumatizations, people begin to actively train themselves not to give in to their emotions and become akumatized, with Paris being taken hostage by Gabriel's constant attacks. Gabriel takes advantage of this by bringing the entire world into a stressed state, using powers to give people nightmares and making them more likely to become akumatized. The only solution for this is for people to calm themselves down with his Alliance Ring technology. This is a massive trap that lures the people of the world into a hypnotic and docile state. And with everyone having these Alliance Rings, he is eventually able to akumatize everyone at once, turning the people of Paris and all over the world into soldiers who have the one intent of finding Ladybug and Cat Noir. It was an epic idea that led to the great moment where Plagg and Tiki finally unify, first to turn Marinette into Catbug, and then for Gabriel to reveal Gimme so that he can make his wish. It's a crazy plan, but one that built up over 5 seasons of testing Ladybug and Gabriel in different ways. It was a long road that ends with Marinette not having a truly happy ending, because at the end of the day, that isn't what would help her continue to grow, and even when she seemingly gets what she wants, it's never quite what she thought. For Marinette in particular, this meant having Adrien, with the show being a slow build for 4.5 seasons to her eventually getting this relationship. But by then, it's not the paradise that she had imagined. Beyond its superhero antics, Miraculous Ladybug is premised very much on the crazy love dynamic between Marinette and Adrien that comes from their secret identities. Marinette is in love with Adrien, but Adrien doesn't notice Marinette in that way when the show first begins. This is at least in part because he's distracted by his feelings for Ladybug, who he does not realize is actually Marinette. This creates a story where these kids and their secret identities are almost separate characters, with Luck going out of its way to make sure that Adrien and Marinette never learn each other's secret identities. This also has its roots in Sailor Moon, I would say, at least partially, where Sailor Moon was in love with another hero, Tuxedo Mask. But in their civilian lives, they didn't know each other's secret identities and were rather antagonistic. This led to each episode having a fun dynamic where the first half involved them fighting and having these funny little arguments, with the second half having them transform and suddenly being romantic with each other. However, to make things even more complex, Miraculous Ladybug also took some inspiration from the Amazing Spider-Man cartoon from the 1990s. While I'd say its formula and lore is much more rooted in the magical girl and anime tropes, Miraculous Ladybug masquerades as a superhero story to draw eyes away from the big comic studios like Marvel and DC, with Ladybug being designed as a female counterpart to Spider-Man with her red color scheme. Cat Noir, meanwhile, is modeled very closely after Black Cat from the Amazing Spider-Man, a darker female superhero that ends up getting involved in Spider-Man's adventures. In his normal civilian life, Peter Parker tries to date Felicia Hardy, but while she does like him, he keeps disappearing on her because of course he is Spider-Man and that has responsibilities. She ends up getting saved by Spider-Man and starts to develop an interest for him, which later becomes full-fledged feelings when she becomes Black Cat and joins him on a few adventures. What you had here was something like we would get in Miraculous Ladybug, but on a smaller scale, with the characters constantly having shifting feelings for the different identities of the same person, without realizing that they are both one and the same. Ladybug took that idea that existed as just a small part of the small time in the Amazing Spider-Man's run, but makes it the core of the show's plot when not dealing directly with magic and superheroes. Now, Luck could have brought Adrien directly to Marinette if the goal was for Marinette to just get what she wanted and be happy, but instead, Marinette needs to learn a lot about balance before she can even have that. And even when she gets the relationship, it seems there's still a lot of learning that needs to happen. At the start of the show, Marinette and Adrien are at opposite ends of the yin-yang cycle, but before they officially get together as Marinette and Adrien, we did see a full reversal of this as the characters reached their opposite extremes. This was early in season 5 when Adrien first started to get feelings for Marinette, but Marinette started to get feelings for Cat Noir. This was a full flip of their dynamic, with each switching their focus to the other person's alternate identity and facing fun challenges there. From these few episodes, we get to explore the other side that exists within these characters, an inversion of their relationship that is almost an inversion of themselves, symbolized in the show by them once again switching Kwame. In the original episode where they switched Kwame, this was used to highlight their differences from each other and the appreciation they have for their own roles. When Ladybug now has feelings for Cat Noir, she ends up acting like him instead of criticizing his role, mindlessly thinking about kissing Cat Noir while he, as Mr. Bug, is trying to actually solve the problem.
You look good in red with black polka dots.
My suit has a really weird influence on you.
It's funny, but eventually Yin and Yang returned to their original places in the balance before Marinette and Adrien finally found something of a relationship. But I don't think we are out of the woods yet with this couple. It's been wonderful to see the relationship between Marinette and Adrien on screen, but to go there we had to go through some struggles. We'd seen through time travel that Adrien and Marinette could find themselves in a loving relationship if they revealed their identities to each other early on, but it seems this would have always led to their identities being exposed to Gabriel as well, with there being 2 episodes involving time travel having to be used to undo the learning of each other's identities. Because of this, the only way they can be together is either as civilians or as heroes, but not as both. And now that we've seen them date as civilians, I think we will next see them date as heroes. Season 5 closed the arc of Gabriel as the first villain that Marinette had to go up against, but the plan is already that the show would run for another 10 years, getting out another 5 seasons with each being 26 episodes. While attaining a relationship with Adrien seemed to be part of the pattern of Ladybug finally getting everything right in her personal and heroic life, both just end up setting up new stories for season 6 and beyond. Whether you want to call it God, Gimme, or just luck, something had guided Gabriel to become the version of himself that would use Gimme's powers nobly, sacrificing only himself to make the world better. This force also turned Marinette into the kind of person who could be smart enough to defeat Gabriel, but compassionate enough to give him the second chance he needed to give up his life for Natalie's health and Adrien's future. On the grand scale, it led to the people of Paris turning away from the greedy capitalists that had come to shape their society in horrifying ways, with a new mayor that has created a green Paris that takes care of its people. By giving evil powers to the right person, the power of luck reshaped the world for the better, and made a great hero to join the others in protecting the planet through Marinette. But none of these stories end here. With Season 5 marking 1 complete year in the show and Gabriel now defeated, we'll be getting 5 new seasons under the villain of Lila Rossi. She is perhaps even more calculating than Gabriel and will undoubtedly be the kind of villain that pushes Marinette to more extremes so that she can continue to grow. Already, the series will be switching up the formula with each of the different teens now holding their own Kwami, and I have to imagine the same will apply to Marinette and Adrian's relationship. Season 5 ended with Marinette holding the secret that Adrian's dad was Shadowmoth, something she now has to keep from her own boyfriend as Marinette. On top of that, Marinette is already paranoid that Adrian may like someone else, as we see in the Season 6 teaser that she is spying on him jogging with another girl. While I don't think Adrian will end up with this or even another character, I think this will lead to Marinette and Adrian breaking up, though of course this doesn't have to be permanent either. The first 5 seasons were about the two characters on opposite sides of the spectrum who slowly came together to form their relationship. And now that they are one blended relationship, the relationship itself now has extremes that need to be blended again. While the show already explored Ladybug trying to date Cat Noir in small doses before they came together as Marinette and Adrian, I could see Season 6 having the two break up in their civilian forms, only for their romance to finally work as heroes. Now that they've explored their relationship as civilians, we could get an entire arc about them exploring a relationship as heroes and how difficult that is with their fame and not being able to go anywhere or really just be alone the way a normal couple would. It would be a fun thing to explore and perhaps a crucial step that would have to be explored before the two can finally reveal their identities and realize they've loved both versions of each other all along. And this would just be another part of this repeating loop where we see another extreme of the formulas we've already established, all slowly leading Marinette to become the bigger version of herself, who perhaps one day will grow beyond even being the guardian of the miraculous, and one day be the guardian of something much greater, perhaps slowly being trained to become a spirit like Gimme, who can guide people with her complexity and intense manipulations. But what do you guys think? This has been a rather long video for Miraculous Ladybug, a show that a lot of people would likely argue doesn't have a lot of real-life spirituality or mythology in it. But if that's what you thought, hopefully this video helped change your mind and maybe made you realize that certain parts of the story that some fans weren't big fans of are an essential part to its yin-yang symbolism. This video was available first for our early access members, and if you want more videos like this, consider signing up here on the channel or on Patreon. These memberships help us pay for these larger videos that go much deeper into the lore. And you'll also get access to the members-only Cartoon Universe Discord chat. Links as always are in the pinned comment down below. I'll see you guys there, and if you haven't seen it yet, consider checking out the big mythological deep dive we did on the Disney Atlantis film. See you guys next time.